What's good, everyone? This is I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude, Mehu Wang, Dou-zhansheng-fo here with another rating, review, so on and so forth. Today, I'm making um kind of a retorted video to a video that I watched associated with Goku versus Sailor Moon. The video specifically is Goku versus Sailor Moon: The Honest Truth by the Tempest channel. Um I suggest you watch that video before you watch this video to get everything that I'm saying. Because I'm not going to do all of the power scaling things like in the way in which that people do it with the numbers and all that other shit. I'm not doing that. Um, but I do think that it needs to be stated on one or more levels or to one or multitude of degrees that per Tempest's explanation of the differences in what we're going to scale as power being, we'll say, sectioned and proportioned by dimensional raises in a respective entity or a respective being. When I state that, I'm meaning, third dimensional, fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional, so on and so forth. I think that a lot of his video in the general sense, like these things have to be understood on the basis of characters and their origin and the origin of their power, so on and so forth. When I say these things, I'm talking about, the characters once again. But and I'm then saying that in conjunction and adjunct from many of the points that he made about Sailor Moon, so on and so forth, to get someone to understand like what their power means in their quote unquote universe or franchise IP dimension. Um and aside from that, I think the big issue that I typically have with Dragon Ball orientive comparative mediums, articles, displays, or expressions is that I don't necessarily feel that there is like a median based off proper understanding. And I'm going to speak to that in a minute, but at the same time, as a side note, I do want to say it seems weird to me at the same time, too, as well, like for us to try to get the comparative power of respective fictional entities, we need to, put them on a basis of the Albert Einstein, so on and so forth, whether or not the, show narrative uses Albert Einstein's, and just the general theories of X, Y, and Z based off whatever representative scientist that we want to use as the focal point or otherwise per, the default for Earth. But if they're still fictional entities and at the same time you couldn't do it retrospectively in the capacity that no one in society can, like turn Super Saiyan or some shit like that, then what is the point in really doing that on the opposite capacity to get a better understanding of entities that don't exist in this world? That doesn't really make any sense, especially because within the basis of what I'm about to state right now, on a level of density on the third dimension, from 100, or you could possibly say even 0, but on 100 to 1,000 is the crux of the third dimension. Everything after 1,000 becomes fourth dimensional, and then so on and so forth by 1,000 to 2,000, depending on how high we start to go up the spectrum. So Goku within the Saiyan Saga, on the basis of it's over 8,000, quintessentially was anywhere betwixt, like a seventh and an eighth dimensional being. If we're going to speak about that and then simultaneously speak about Sailor Moon within earshot, and we understand the entirety of Sailor Moon is far beyond like the moment of it's over 8,000 in terms of like power, which I would say anyone can say in a general sense, okay. But where that then becomes confusing, not for like just me, like I'm saying anyone looking at it in the general sense, but especially if you have some understanding of like, not gonna say Dragon Ball power levels, but like just general cognizance of how the world works. And when I say the world, I mean, just life, and a better understanding of how to convey it within the capacity of these respective IPs and fictional characters, which is, I feel like, hard to present a middle ground, to speak about it objectively while still being even or fair tempered while you're conveying, the information. But I digress. At the same time, speaking on if we're gonna if we're gonna use that the dimensions, and we were talking about the galaxy cauldron and so on and so forth, and etc., you know um and by the time I got to the end of the video, Sailor Moon's supposed to be like ninth dimensional. That's not nothing, comparatively, considering that Goku's basically seventh dimensional if we're going by our science, which on the basis of Albert Einstein and science at around his time is being used as the default point of science in both respective worlds, quote unquote, as per the video. So that's where it then doesn't make any fucking sense. And then at the same time, if we're talking about how time and space can be a dimension, and how that can go, like, that can be seen as fourth and fifth D as labels, respective labels for those both respective concepts, that also doesn't make any sense, within the capacity. Because even though someone who has, quote unquote, and when I say someone, like, like, I guess a god, or like a being of a higher density, if they, because of their higher density, their ascended status, they can move through, quote unquote, what someone would determine as time on our side, but is quintessentially to them like, just waves in the water, kind of. In theory, looking at that in a general sense is no different than, like, Hercule looking at Goku fight someone, and then this nigga, like, basically Z vanishes, and then he's right in front of the person. And to Hercule, he didn't see him Z vanish. He just saw him. He was there. He disappeared in an instance, and then he was somewhere else next to the opponent. So we get to see, like, what higher density would mean in observation on a three-dimensional level in the general sense throughout a lot of shows, quote unquote, but especially within the capacity of, like, Dragon Ball, considering where their power level goes. So I say all that to say that, like, quintessentially, Dragon Ball is already several densities above what Tempest is referencing on the basis of power scaling. Several densities, if we're using the power level on the basis of the respective character in analysis therein's frequency, that then comparatively speaks to what level of dimensional being they are in that given instance. And at the same time, within that, and how I also have heard people, and I would say, because I'm not sure if Tempest said this is not just things that I've heard at this point, per this point in the video going forward, but just for this small bit. Like, I've heard that people have stated that Sailor Moon, or certain characters that are like Sailor Moon, that it seems like it's more like magic. Goku wouldn't really be able to do anything because Goku's weak to quote unquote magic. But within the respective capacity, like, this is where I would say, like, certain people need to think about things in the proper connotation, because realistically, everything that Goku and, like, let's say the Z Fighters, or everyone, and anything and every one that we've seen in Dragon Ball, they're basically doing magic, whether they're a super magic oriented character or otherwise, because quintessentially, like, what is a ki blast? like it's an energy blast. Like we've all like played like a game or something, and there's a mage, and they have like there's a perk tree or a part of the perk tree that's specifically just energy, like psionic, like energy kind of moves outside of like the elemental moves that you can do. So like he's doing things with chi or ki or prana or nen or so on and so forth. And that's what I'm trying to say at the same time. All of the different representations for energy based off whatever the word is for the respective anime, it's all referencing energy, and all of those words all mean energy in the general sense. So like how the respective characters from other IPs in one capacity or another happen to, synthesize overall energy to do the moves that they do is, based off the creators of the show and so on and so forth. But it's all just energy manipulation, and energy manipulation is defined as magic. So if we're talking about that, or magic being the manipulation of energy, that would quintessentially mean on the basis of the characters that we're talking about in a general sense for the basis of this video, but also overall as it pertains to all anime in comparison to Goku, and just comparative to all other shows, but especially in comparison to Goku. It's like, everyone's doing magic regardless, and everyone on Dragon Ball does magic in the general sense, period. Just period. As you start to get higher in density, or you start to get higher in power level, regardless of like the IP, you basically, things that you will be able to do will be like miracle-esque. It will be Jesus-esque. It will be, on a level or a basis that is essentially like to people who are not on that power level, who aren't on that frequency, they won't be able. It will just be like, he just appeared and he just created this thing. So I want to say that at the same time, because Goku definitely can't put hands on anyone who, quote unquote, is like more seen as like a magic user, because his hands are rated E for everyone, magically included, because he's already magic. We're talking about chi, like we're talking about someone who is very experienced in energy manipulation on the basis of like it being all over you, like on the basis of like, we could say chakra control in Naruto, but even when he mastered like the God mode, and then his ki wasn't leaking out, like, so we're talking about chi manipulators in the general sense, in a martial sense, but that's still magic in and of its sense, like, is what I'm trying to state. And then back to Sailor Moon, yeah. So I would basically say that, in retrospect, I don't think that Sailor Moon can be Goku if we're saying that Sailor Moon is ninth dimensional, and the star seeds and so on and so forth. Like, I don't want to reiterate none of the same things that was already stated, because that's why I said watch the video prior, because I watched it fully and I completely comprehended, but it still doesn't matter to me. I comprehended it, but it still doesn't matter to me, more on a basis of like, Goku could theoretically destroy the galaxy when he was just a Super Saiyan, because Frieza could destroy the entire like universe, like before ever meeting Goku. And obviously there are some respective numbers for that and all that other crap, so on and so forth. But like, I say that to say that in quintessential retrospect, Goku is already on, if we're saying presently, or maybe just before Toriyama died, at that point, Goku's on a level dimensionally that I'm not going to say isn't countable, but is basically ridiculous. So if we're going to speak about what that means for like space and time and other nuances such as that, like continuums and being able to destroy so on and so forth, like that is already possible on a myriad of levels for someone of Goku's ilk, or even if you don't want to say Goku, if you want to say like Vegeta, so on and so forth, like that is very possible. They just haven't decided to go down that route in the canon. But I just feel like if you're using your brain and you really think about it, based off how powerful these niggas have gotten, but even well before God level and all that other stuff, like based off the feats and what comparative evil villains, quote unquote, could do before they were beaten by, the Z fighters or whatever. Like, even if we're referencing Boo and what Boo could do to the universe and so on and so forth, like, and that's still, all that stuff's still way before the God oriented things. No, it's just no. I understand what people are saying about Sailor Moon, like where Sailor Moon's just overpowered, but if we're talking about Goku and unfortunately, like, there's always been the talks of Dragon Ball S things versus any other medium in existence. That's always existed. But, people have a habit of like using Goku's most recent form in the present tense of the comparison, when like before his most recent form was any of the God forms, and it was just, Super Saiyan 3 or Super Saiyan 2, all you would see is, them putting him in a versus capacity and he's in those respective forms. And they, in one capacity or another, whether or not they was giving him flowers or saying that he was going to lose. Not that saying he's going to lose isn't giving him flowers, they're still acknowledging him. But, like, they would still do what they was going to do in that given instance then. And whether it's he had a hard time or he won or he's going to lose, so on and so forth, it was then. And he basically seemed unstoppable then. So I don't, it doesn't make any sense for people to use the most recent forms now, being any of the God forms, damn near, especially Ultra Instinct, when the other characters that exist in all of anime, but especially if we're going to talk about Sailor Moon, and we're saying that they're ninth dimensional, just because a character can do what they do in their universe, and this will sound like, like, why wouldn't you apply that notion to Dragon Ball as well? I am, respectively. It's just based off the uniqueness of the power that is represented in Dragon Ball compared to other shows. In retrospect, in combination with the same units of measurement that people would use to try to compare Dragon Ball to other things on the basis of why those other things would then beat any Dragon Ball character, it still doesn't hold up. Like, it's not as fair to them is what I'm saying, because we don't have to use Goku. Like, even if we're just talking about, and I'll basically say everything before Beast, because I don't like any of that shit. So even if we're just talking about, like, we'll say not even Goku. We could say Vegeta, but I wanted to say Gohan. But I do definitely think that Sailor Moon might be able to beat Gohan. But using the same logic that I've stated for this entire video, realistically, she shouldn't be able to beat Gohan if we're talking about like potential unleashed Gohan. Theoretically, she shouldn't be able to beat him because his power level is far beyond ninth dimension. And just because the respective characters, like I was saying in Sailor Moon before, are able to quote unquote destroy galaxies and dimensions and so on and so forth, characters in Dragon Ball have been able to do that forever. And their power level has been far beyond fifth dimensional forever. Well before God became a thing, well before Ultra Instinct became a thing, forever. Like, for the better part of 20 years now. So, like, it doesn't make any sense to state, like, oh, like, because the galaxy cauldron, like, so on and so forth. Like, there have been characters that have been basically that level, if not, the reasoning for all of existence, so on and so forth. And it could have been written in one capacity or another that Dragon Ball characters could have, like, gone that route, so on and so forth, whatever. It just didn't. But we can clearly see, based off their capability, that it is a foregone conclusion in retrospect, even though it is not canon. It's obvious. It's not something that needs to be debated. It really isn't. Even on the basis of like someone being able, you know, it has to be canon, like so on and so forth. Like, come on, bro. Like, come on, bro. Like, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, and I'm going to respect that in a general sense. But like, if this is a real like barbershop talk, like if this is, you know, we going over shit. Like, come on, son. You know, like you know, like you feel me, you feel me, you feel me. Dragon Ball characters, but especially Goku, are way farther in dimensional, um, energetic manipulation than characters of Sailor Moon. And quintessentially, what I'm saying in the grand scheme is that Sailor Moon characters are just drastically weaker than Dragon Ball characters. It just wouldn't seem like that in retrospect based off how they've written their world, but that's really what it is in the grand scheme, and that's just my opinion. But in either instance, this has been Matt Huang, the Dou-zhansheng-fo here with another rating review, so on and so forth. I'm out.